Thanks for joining us today. We're welcome to the UK BIM Alliance quarterly forum. This is our third of the year, Q3. Actually, only feels like it was about a month ago when we were last here, but it's been holiday season and all sorts going on in between. Apologies for the slight delay to the start. We've had to rejig the agenda somewhat, but we're all good. We know what we're doing now, so we're all organised and we should fire ahead. But I'll keep this quite brief. Bit of housekeeping for those of you who weren't here this morning, and I won't do as well as Ian did over there. The facilities around the back side of the lift core, fire exits either side, and there's no planned fire alarm. So if it goes off, that's a real one. It says symbol out there, will be taken down. We have scheduled a short comfort break in between the afternoon. We'll aim to wrap up about 4. We're a bit late starting, so we might just nudge past a bit. We'll try and keep on agenda. Do be honest, open. We're running, as Sean mentioned earlier, we're running Slido, so that's a way to post some questions as you go. Obviously, it encourages people on the same. Sometimes you don't really want to put your hand up at the end and ask a question. So we will be running Slido. That's at the bottom. So if you're in your browser on your phone, if you literally just type slide.do, that'll bring up the website, #AllianceForum, and that'll take you straight in. You can just post some questions as we go. And then we'll either work through those after each bit of the agenda or do it at the end. Please use that, or if not, save your questions and shout out at the end, because we'll do a sort of like Q&A. The Twitter handles there are #AllianceForum, so if you're tweeting or anything, please do use that. And do be honest, open, and do challenge us, but not too much. The new agenda looks like this. So we're 25 past, so we're a little bit behind already, but I'm going to start off with some news from the engagement stream, what we've been up to in that piece of the Alliance. Pam's not with us today, she's actually over in Ireland with Cedar BIM Gathering. Building Smart news update, so David Glenn is also with Pam, he's not with us, so we've got Phil Reed here who's going to do a piece on that, and Emma Hooper. Hopefully by then Anne will be with us, and we'll have a bit of a view from Anne, a view from the bridge of what's going on. Short comfort break at 2:20. We'll come back then and we'll have Fred Mills, probably needs no introduction to the room here, to do a piece. Following on, we'll have Sarah Davidson give an update on the projects the Alliance is commissioning. Introduce our new Vice Chair, Casey, and he'll just explain his role briefly, and then we'll do the Q&A, go through Slido, shout out your questions, and we'll do our best to answer. And then a bit of networking, and off we go. So we'll try and wrap up by 4 or so. Okay, so here's where we didn't reorder the slides, the agenda, so I'm just going to manually, don't worry, it's fine, I know where I am, just bear with us. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, we're human.
There we go, yeah, exactly. So from engagement, and again, we always like to just you know, it'd be wrong of us not to put this up. So the Alliance, as many of you know, is not funded from government or any sort of revenue stream like that. We have to generate our own income, and that's done via patron sponsors, of which we have 9 platinum, 8 gold, and 3 bronze. There are the logos of our platinum sponsors. We have an ownership to produce a mid-year report back to those patrons and see where their money is being invested and what we're doing. So that's been going on. We've just issued the mid-year report, and we do need more. We need more income to do more. So if any of you in the room think your companies or you know someone who may be interested, then do get in touch and we can have that discussion. There's different tiers of patronage, so yeah, it's not. We can tailor that to suit. Okay. We also have supporters, obviously people who invest their time into the Alliance. We're not sponsored, but their companies are letting them effectively work on the behalf of the Alliance. So we obviously recognise that and appreciate that. There's some of our supporters. Moving on to events. So it's conference season, as we all know at the moment. So it's been quite busy for the engagement stream in terms of events, things that are happening and coming up. So we've got This Is Change. That's actually happening today, which is really annoying because a fantastic event series that started up, and again that's a project in partnership with the Alliance. Unfortunately, it clashed with the forum. We'd already arranged the dates. That's happening in Manchester at the moment, and it is going to be an event series. So we'll touch more on that shortly. Seat to Build gathering, as I mentioned, Pam and Dave Glennon are over there at the moment for tomorrow. That starts tomorrow. We've got UK Construction Week coming up. We've got Digital Construction Week coming up in October as well. The Building Smart International Standards Summit towards the end of October, and then London Build in November. So yeah, hell of a lot going on, lots to go and see and interact with. And I'll just touch on some of those key events as we go through. So DCW, so as we did last year, the Alliance is running sort of two areas, if you like, the BIM Village and the workshops. We've also got a stand, which looks like that. Well, that's from a pitch from last year, and that will be now on the side of that the BIM Village area. The plan is to use the stand as obviously a networking discussion area. I think Pam's already put out some feeders to some of our BIM 4 groups to potentially host some workshops and discussions there, and we still need people to come and say, again, if you want to get involved, if it's going to be useful for you to have a topic or a discussion thread at there, then do get in contact with engagement. We can facilitate that. So London Build, we're going to be running the BIM and Digital Construction Zone, of which there is theatre and the BIM Geospatial Clinic. So what does that look like? And again, going back to our sort of community groups, the special interest groups, the BIM 4s have a number of topics going on in the clinic. And again, the agenda's not quite finalised for the digital construction zone, but that's nearly there and that's looking quite good. So that's probably a good one to go along to if you can afford the time. So Alliance Road, so for probably the last 18 months or so, we've been doing a kind of tour of the country, putting on these things we like to call road shows, where we have speakers. We partner with a BIM region, or indeed any venue to put these on. The venues on the left, that's where we've been this year. We're still trying to target Kent, Plymouth, Ireland, Liverpool, Glasgow, and North Wales, and any more we can get about. And again, if it doesn't have to be hosted by a BIM region, if you think your company in one of those areas would be able to host it, let us know. We'll partner with you, and we'll put on a really good event, get some good speakers, get some good content, and flash it out. So yeah, opportunities there. So onto communities. So our current, so we have a team of 4 people, or we did have 4, 2 leads effectively, trying to coordinate the combined effort of the communities, the BIM 4s and the regions, and the other special interest groups. Our current leads, Jill and David Owens, have kind of served their tenure there. They're going to step back for next year. So this is putting out there. We're looking for new people to sort of potentially step in there and help with that effort. There's quite a lot to do. From the last forum in the morning, we had a communities meeting which Jill hosted, and there was a list of desirable actions coming out of that forum that need to be actioned. So there's kind of stuff there that needs doing. We just need to find the resources to help deliver that. So again, do bear that in mind. If you think you've got some bandwidth and that's something that may excite you or you'll be interested in, we'd love to talk to you, and we can work out how that will work going forward. The other big thing, the other big stream under engagement is affiliates. So that's starting to gather a bit of momentum, and again, for me, that's probably going to be up there with the magnitude of the communities and the reach. So what that is essentially is the Alliance partnering with the industry organisations. So think of your REBAs, your SIBSEs, your RICS, all of the big institutions and smaller trade associations to try and So we've flashed out a package, affiliates package, that says the Alliance would like from you as an affiliate X, Y, and Z, and we think we can give you this. So, and it's as much about getting the message out there and drawing the resources as we can. That started. We've got a new lead, Maxine Beadle, who's going to be coordinating that, and we're going to put on an event on the 6th of Feb with ideally target the top. We've got a list of 20 contacts in those institutions to try and start that discussion and get access to that wider user base and try and drive this business as usual agenda. And again, it doesn't just have to be institutions, any organisation. We've had initial good discussions with Constructing Excellence. Again, very similar objectives as organisations, regional working groups. It'd be crazy for us not to try and partner. So that's has been a good initial discussion. We're going to take that forward. So some positives there. And this was a kind of little reminder list from Pam. So please do get in touch with us here at Engagement. If you would like a networking table or pod at DCW, if you want to host an Alliance roadshow, as we went through earlier, communities leadership, we need some resources. There's probably one or two in the audience who may be interested in that. I'll speak afterwards. If you're interested in becoming a patron, please do get in touch. Ambassador also, and any non-sales pitch industry news opinions, submit a blog. That we can facilitate that as well. That's the email address there. That'll come to me and Pam, and we can start a conversation. Wonderful. That's not a break time. We're now going to go into Building Smart UK and Ireland update. And I shall just kick that off and then I'll hand over.
Nothing on slide, so.
No, any questions before I move on engagement? Or we can pick those up at the end if not. It's no problem at all. Yeah. Okay. Fire on. So, Building Smart news. And again, David Glennon would normally do this. He's in Ireland, so I'm just going to introduce this for him. So we have Emma in the crowd, who's going to talk shortly. So Emma's been brought to the table. She's obviously an open standards enthusiast and knowledgeable on the IFC front. She's trying to reinvigorate the UK and Ireland chapter of Building Smart and really start to drive an input at a higher scale. So, and I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you talk about that, Emma, shortly. And we do have Phil Reid as well, I'm about to hand over, who's reigniting the personal certification that Building Smart are looking to facilitate. Again, so really good that it's around the corner. And yeah, so the UK and Ireland chapter is obviously engaged with the other international chapters, sharing best practice and knowledge and trying to maintain those links with CETA as well in Ireland. So I shall kindly hand over to Phil, if that's okay, just to do a bit of an update on the certification.
Good. Good afternoon. Still awake. Good. So I guess a lot of faces don't know me, and I don't know a lot of faces. So as a way of introduction, I am Phil Reid, obviously. I am currently, my day job is the Managing Director of Man and Machine UK. Best described as an IT solutions company or a company providing IT solutions to the construction industry. Enough about Man and Machine and enough about me. So let me sort of crack on with why I'm here. So I guess the first reason is I didn't put my hand up, I just held my head above the parapet just for that little bit too long. So I find myself here now leading this task group to try and get some momentum behind this Building Smart certification. But for me, and I think for the group that I'm trying to form, it really should be part of something that's a bit wider in terms of a digital competence framework. And that's really what I see it as. And I really want to talk about that and perhaps the aspirations. And for me, there's several things that this covers. It covers things like knowledge acquisition, learning, if you like. It can cover company certification, and it also can cover personal certification. I also think for us, we need to engage with UCAS. If you don't know who UCAS are, I'm sure many of you do. It's the UK Accreditation Service. It's the national accreditation service in the UK. There is one in every country. They're part of a much bigger global community, and I think we need to get those guys engaged in what we're trying to do. So before I start talking about what is a digital competence framework, or my version of that, I'd like to maybe dispel a couple of myths, because part of what I think we need to do here is also to figure out what this cannot be. Because there are some things I feel it cannot be, but this is all out for discussion. As I say, nothing here is set in concrete at this point. We're very early days into it. So let me start by getting some audience participation. How dare I? Just a show of hands. How many of you work in a supply chain? You have people that you subcontract to, people that you are partnering with, etc., etc. Okay. Dare I ask, have any of you ever had a bad service from somebody in the supply chain? Okay. I'm going to give you a hypothesis, which you can agree with or disagree with. You cannot have had a bad service from that company. because every one of those companies, or I will bet you pretty much every one of those companies, actually has a certification. It's called ISO 9001, which basically says they have a quality system and a quality management system, so how can they possibly deliver a bad service? Does anyone agree with that hypothesis? Okay, I don't necessarily agree with it. So some did, some didn't. So why the ones that don't agree with that, why is that the case?
If I say in my certification I'm going to supply a bad service, then I'm satisfied 9001.
Yes, that's a very good point. You can provide a bad service. What if you don't say that? And you actually report to provide a good service? Why don't we always get a good service, or what we're expecting? Delivery is not consistent.
It's like a restaurant, when it's good as the best chef.
There you go. Yeah, good example. So the problem is we're dealing with human beings. So the real issue here is whatever we do, that doesn't mean we can guarantee that you're going to get what you are expecting to get. The same would be true, I would suggest, of training. Anyone been on a bad training course? Ever? Okay, what was the reason? Was it content or was it people? People. All right, so again, it's the same issue. They might have the very best content in that training course. It doesn't mean you're going to be well trained, because there's a lot of other things that go into becoming a good educator, in my opinion. So let me sort of leave that to percolate with you, because I'm going to come back to that when I talk about this thing I call a competence cube. I'm also going to just tell you what I think a digital competence framework ought to be and what it ought not to be. And again, it's open for discussion, because we, as industry, have to define what this is. So firstly, it should not be driven by any commercial gain for any company, including my company. So we need to avoid that. And it shouldn't be a commercial gain for the accreditors, if we're talking about certification, or for training providers, if a company is providing training under whatever this scheme or certification ends up being. It should not lock in any one service provider. Of course, it should be part of the upskilling program. That's what I'm talking about today, is really taking the upskilling program a bit further. What it should be, again, in my opinion, is a strategy for defining, developing, managing, and assuring competence as much as you can. We really want to assure competence so we can deliver project tasks well. And it shouldn't, what we're really trying to do here is evolve a digitally competent and agile workforce in the UK. So we need to be passionate about the UK construction industry, which will de-risk the outcome of projects and help us make the right decisions at the right time. So I think that's what this framework, whatever it is that we come up with, needs to look like. And I want to give you some reasons why we need one, because, there is an argument that we don't need one, I guess, but I would argue that we do need one. So this is very simple. I don't mean to teach you to suck eggs or anything, but there are some reasons I think that are worth just reiterating. Firstly, we want the international community to demand our services. Why? Because it's good for the economy, basically. It's good for employment, it's good for the government, because they tax us on the profits we make from those good projects that we work on, and that can drive reinvestment, increase GDP. So I think there's lots of reasons why it's good to have a competence framework. We also want to avoid these kind of things. I'm not going to talk about any one of these. You're all aware of them, I'm sure. But, if you read some of the press, if you like, or some of the reports that are written around some of these things, the word competence comes up quite a lot. So we really need to try and drive competence throughout the UK as much as we can. I think there's another reason why it's important to have digital competence. So this is about adopting digital competence in the construction industry. And I think you can believe these stats, you can find your own stats. It doesn't really matter if they're different from these stats, but they're big. These are stats that you can read on the internet about how much water pollution, air pollution, landfill waste, and energy the built environment absorbs or creates. So that's an issue. The trouble is, this issue is going to get worse, because if you believe what's happening with the stats around things like the population, going from 7.6 billion to about 10 billion in 2050, these issues are going to get worse. It's great for the construction industry, by the way, because there's lots of opportunity in here, I suggest. But these issues are going to become worse. We've also got the issue of increased urbanisation. About 54% of the population currently globally lives in cities. They reckon by 2050 that's going to be 70%. So we need to do something about this, and obviously what we're trying to do here with digital technology and BIM level 2 is drive efficiencies in our construction projects, which hopefully will address some of these issues. We also need industry support, and again, I'm open to debate, discussion from the floor, but also from the people that will be hopefully seconded to this group that's going to try and drive this forward. And I think, when I think about industry support, and I think about what I've been known to call certification with teeth, this is about the UK BIM Alliance, it's about building smart, but I think it also can involve UCAS. And I've socialised what I'm about to, or what I'm telling you with UCAS already, and they are, let's not use the word excited, but they're definitely interested in getting involved in having a programme that they will engage on in terms of doing proper certification. So I said I'd mention the competence cube. Again, I want to come back to what, when we talk about people assuring competence or even training, whatever aspect of this you want to talk about, I often talk about this thing called the competence cube, which has 3 axes. The first one is education. So this is what you are taught and learn. The second one is exposure, so the opportunity to use that education to work on projects. So, we have a responsibility to give staff, for example, that kind of thing. And the final one is experience, which comes typically with age. So these are the kind of areas that define whether somebody's competent to do a task. And, a good example, let's take training as an example. So if I take a university graduate out of university who's got a master's degree in BIM and get him to train somebody, is he going to be a good trainer? Probably not at that point, because he's on this axis, he's maybe well up here, but he hasn't yet floated into the cube. And all of us float in this cube somewhere in terms of our competence. Am I competent to do a managing director's job? Well, I've had some education, I've had some exposure, I've had some experience, so I'm floating in here as well somewhere. And what we really want to try and do here is put a framework together that embraces what Building Smart are doing, but also tries to address kind of some of these wider issues. So, in terms of thinking, and this is the final slide, this is kind of where we're at the moment. So, on the right-hand side, in terms of competence, you've got this kind of knowledge acquisition. So this is education, doing learning. And on the your right-hand side, on your left-hand side, we've got this thing called accreditation certification. And I'm really trying to get, with this task group, some thoughts around how this all fits together with those different industry bodies and doesn't disenfranchise any service providers that are offering good training. So I think the first thing is, if we talk about the right-hand side, we have education. So I think there's different types of education people are offering at the moment. You've got what I would call base education. What is BIM? What does it do? What is the process? What is the workflow? How do you run a BIM project? And then here you've got domain-specific education. This is more about real specialist domains on a project. And Building Smart are working on this already. They've engaged with people like Bill East internationally to do a domain-specific qualification, for example, around Kobe. So we need to work out how all this is going to fit together and merge together. What I would say in terms of thinking is whatever this looks like, it needs to be underpinned by a well-defined learning outcome framework, which is something that Building Smart has very much got in hand already. There are a number of countries that have already signed up to this learning outcome framework. So that's what I think we need to have to underpin this education. But I really am keen to get UCAS involved in this accreditation. I think that would be a very valuable thing to do, because there are lots of companies out there at the moment doing certification in the UK. Nothing wrong with it, perfectly good, perfectly credible companies. But I know for a fact one of those companies is doing accreditation using PAS 1192 as their benchmark, and another one is using PAS 1192 and BS 1192-5 as their benchmark. So there is a lack of consistency there. So we need to get UCAS involved in this. I met with them on Monday. We had a discussion. I showed them this. I socialised this with them, and they're very keen to get involved. And the beauty of having a national accreditation agency involved is they will actually assess. They have a thing called a conformity assessment of the accreditation company, whoever that is, to make sure they know how to do an accreditation. And there's lots of guidance around that in how that's structured, how it's done, how it's delivered, how they're assessed, etc., etc. And there are two types. There's the company side of it and there's a professional side of it. So this is individual and this is company. They will almost certainly start here with a a pilot program. This is done under the guise of this standard here, 17065, which is about assessing somebody to a process. And in this case, the thing that they've identified that is something they could do an assessment to, it is ISO 19650-2. Very much viewed as a process. So they can actually assess to that process. And that's kind of where we're starting from with UCAS. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. I don't want to use up too much more of the 20 minutes or so that we've got. And I know Emma's on next. So I'll leave it there. Does anybody have any questions? It's very early days.
There are two questions for Slido. First one, isn't digital competence going to remain poor until the industry and more importantly clients stop with the lowest common cost mentality? Or the lowest cost mentality?
Yes, I think you're right. Whoever asked that question, I think you're absolutely right. So part of what we have to do, if we sit over this side of here, I think, is make sure that we are educating clients. Because that is one of the biggest issues I see day to day out in industry, is a lack of knowledge with clients about what they're asking for on a digital project, if I can leave it that broad.
And then one more. Nearly every BIM PQQ, PAS 91, and or tender requests a UCAS accreditation. When in actual fact it says if you have a UCAS accreditation, you're exempt from the following.
Yep.
How do we educate the industry on this issue? Because it's the same 4 questions that get asked every time.
Yeah, but I guess there is no UCAS accreditation for this at the moment. No such thing, because they haven't done a pilot program. So it's not, I hate to say it, it's nonsense to ask for a UCAS accreditation on a project, because it doesn't exist. It will, hopefully, within this the confines of this framework, and when they get this pilot program going, which in my discussions with them at the moment looks to be around Q1 next year. Yes?
Can I ask, so is the drive to get yet another certification scheme through Building Smart, obviously with the added bonus of getting UCAS involved, or is it to get UCAS involved so that the other certifications all align? What's the main drive?
Well, I think that's what we need to work through, and that's where we need different opinions from different people in different organisations about what we should do and can do. I don't have all the answers. I'm 6 hours into this project, so I'm just starting out. I don't have all the answers at this moment in time, but I think in the UK, involvement of UCAS will get, when you start to talk about, let's name some names, BSI, BRE, Ocean, Stroke, all these companies that do certification. I'm sure it's all very laudable and all very credible, but let's make sure it's done consistently, and if you're being certified by those organisations, it's consistent in terms of what the outcome is.
Question, Phil.
Yes.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is it your intention that this would be applied to construction product manufacturers as well?
That's a good question, and I have an answer to it. Perhaps I should leave it for another day.
The reason I ask is because it's my issue always, and I know I'm going to drop Tricia in it because I know she shares my view as well.
Yes, I probably share your view as well, but let's hear it.
The danger is if, as manufacturers, we say we've got this fantastic certification, qualification, people will assume that no matter what, our data has been checked and is right. I think that would be an assumption that would be made.
Yes.
And
which is wrong, right?
Which is, of course, is wrong. And then
Nobody's
looking. Certainly,
guarantee anything.
BSI aren't looking at, even if we've got anybody updating a database, or even if we've got a database, for example.
Yeah.
So there's, I think there's if it does include manufacturers, I think it has to include some form of verification and validation of data.
Yeah, and I also have an issue, forget the certification for a second, I also have an issue over here. Because a learning outcome framework that is applicable to an architectural structural engineer or building services engineer is not necessarily useful to a product manufacturer.
Exactly.
All right, it needs to be a different learning outcome framework. So how do we handle that? I don't know yet. I'm 6 hours into the job, but ask me again next time around, and maybe you want to join the team.
Yeah, George Stevenson from Active Plan. One of the things that's interesting with this, and I think it's really important to do, is to look at it from the context. I've worked with Lloyd's Register in terms of their BIM accreditation.
Yes.
And the teams that I was working with there come from the asset management side of things. So they have a perspective on the accreditation for BIM Level 2 around that.
Yes.
The BRE team look at things slightly differently.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure that BSI are going to be different again.
Exactly.
And the other question that really we need to be looking at is most of this stuff isn't about technology; it's about process. So how do we address the cultural side of things and the workflows and the processes rather than just the technology? So it's not a matter of BIM accreditation, which I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but it's actually looking at all of the other elements, which obviously makes it a very big task.
It is a big task.
But I think it really is quite important to take into account that the context in which you're being assessed.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I have to say, that's where I've had a meeting with these guys. It's quite refreshing the way that they are going to look at this, because they're using this. They don't care about technology. They're looking at process, workflow. They're looking at making sure that there's no link between the training and the certification, that there's no commercial interest involved. These standards are very robust in the way that they assess conformity of the people that are doing the certification.
But I would urge you also to consider ISO 55000.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not just a matter of what we've got in the building and the BIM community. It's also looking at things from a point of view of what is an asset. And
yes, and that is a very different viewpoint. If you're an asset manager to the architect to the structural engineer, I mean that's the interesting and challenging thing, I guess, about the digital built environment is you've got all these different domains and they've all got a very different interpretation of what this is.
But as I understand it,
and a challenge.
yeah, as I understand it with ISO 55000, it's far more holistic. So it isn't just about people that are managing the asset and changing light fittings and things like that. It's actually looking at what the organisational requirement is, and a lot of the things that we've built into the 1192 protocols in terms of AIRs and OIRs, they've actually done a lot of that work differently, but they've done it in ISO 55000, and it's a
anyway. Absolutely don't think we should ignore it. Thank you for that feedback. Yes.
Yeah, just a voice out in support of what you're hoping to do, Phil. I can see, I know competence is featured possibly about 247 times in the Building a Safer Future consultation, and if you look at it as a wider picture, on what's hoping to be achieved, not just for manufacturers, not just for asset owners, and not just for the construction industry as a whole, it is a topic that is going to be key over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll support you in any way that I can.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're in.
Any more questions? We'll let Phil go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take up all that time.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Really good. Just realised, is everyone here at the back okay, or do we need to? Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, over to Emma.
So hello everyone. So I'm going to be presenting a really sort of short and basic introduction about building smarts, Open BIM, and the UK and Ireland chapter. So my name is Emma Hooper, and for my day job I'm a digital information specialist at Von Bryan Digital, where I work as an information manager on projects. I love information. I'm fascinated by the mechanics of it, how it all links together and joins up to make patterns. And I love it even more when it's ordered and in a logical way, which is why we need standards. And in terms of standards, these are some of the things that I've been up to recently. And this includes joining the committee for the UK and Ireland Building Smart chapter, which is why I'm speaking to you here today. But also in terms of my BSI work, I've recently succeeded Nick Nesbitt in becoming the UK expert for ISO 16739, which you'll all know as IFC. So we're all familiar with the idea of a construction project, and supporting this is information. In fact, projects are made up of the constant swapping or exchanging of information. It's like the lifeblood of a project, taking many different paths between people and technology. And when I say information, I mean all information. Whether it's a drawing, a report, a 3D model, an email, or even a conversation. For me, it doesn't matter what it is. It all does the same thing. It enables the transfer of knowledge and understanding to a recipient to satisfy a purpose, whether that's performing a task, making a decision, or asking a question. The ISO 19650 series is about information management using building information modelling. And for me, this splits into two parts. The information management part gives us a framework to help us manage all information within the context of a project by defining, planning, delivering, and checking it. The things that we should be doing anyway. And this is like the structure of a story, creating the plot, the characters, the timing, the order, and setting the scene. As part of the story, we use a lot of technology for different uses to help us generate, coordinate, analyse, and check our information. And our information in construction is extremely varied. It's been developed across many different silos over many different years in an ad hoc fashion. And from a technology perspective, it has countless variations, overlaps, it's disjointed, and a bit of a mess. And computers don't like these things. They like logic, order, and things to be black and white. They like information to be structured. And this is what building information modelling does. It increases efficiency by taking our information and structuring it as much as possible in data models, in databases. And the more information we can structure, the better. But we also need to consider something else. It needs to be done in a consistent way, from the start of a project right through to the end. And this allows us to join it up, make connections, and gain a greater understanding from it. From a technology perspective, it allows interoperability. So a receiving platform knows where to look for the data it needs and what the relationships are, so it too can make sense of it. And this allows us to do really cool things like automate tasks, analyse big data sets, and carry out predictions across the whole project. This consistency is what OpenBIM provides. And going back to our story, OpenBIM provides a common digital language to tell the story from start to end. On projects, I see many different spreadsheets, databases, and models which are all structured in completely different ways with no link between them. And it's like taking different chapters from those books and putting them together to make a story. It wouldn't make a lot of sense. So what is OpenBIM? It's a set of standards which promote open and shareable information. So no matter what your discipline is or what technology you use, you can be part of and understand the story. I talk a lot about collaborative procurement and people working together. Well, it's like that, but with information. Everyone should be able to use information in the way that they think is best, using the best tools for the job without hitting barriers all the time. Also with the added comfort that what they're exchanging is correct because it's been checked. And I've spent a large part of my career not learning about construction, but actually working out hacks and workarounds to interoperability issues. And that's not across vendor softwares, that's within one vendor's software and also within one software itself. Data will pass through many types of software throughout a project. And it's the data which is important, not the software, which generated or analysed it. They're merely tools. Software changes, but the information needs to remain intact for many years. And these standards are developed and managed in conjunction with an organisation called Building Smart International. And this is made up of chapters from all around the world, which each develop and promote the use of Open BIM within their respective regions. And ours is the UK and Ireland chapter, which is part of the UK BIM Alliance. Development of these standards is also broken down into rooms, each of which have their own domain focus about how the standards can be best developed and applied to each one. And here are the standards. So, IFC provides the master data model schema, how objects are classified, what information is associated to them, and how they relate to each other. And from this schema, exchange specifications are developed based on each information purpose. And these are called model view definitions. And over the next few years, I think you're going to be hearing this term a lot more. BIM Collaboration Format, or BCF, provides an open mechanism for communication of model-based issues, and this is actually gaining really good traction on projects at the moment. The common language, which supports IFC, is managed by the Building Smart Data Dictionary, and the processes behind all this to define, plan, deliver and check information can be documented using information delivery manuals. And in the context of a project, IFC is the master schema which is built up in the background when generating data models. It represents a built asset but in a digital format. The language of entities and properties and attributes is aligned to the Building Smart Data Dictionary, and then for each purpose on a project, MVDs, which are like filters, are exported from the data models, and these contain only the minimum amount of information required to carry out other uses, such as coordination, costing, programming, and also to support checking where required. And any issues which arise following these activities can then be recorded within a BCF file, like clashes, and communicated back to the original authors. And then the process of documenting what goes in MVDs through requirements, the delivery of that, the BCF process can then all be defined within information delivery manuals. So that was a really sort of quick overview of the basics of what Open BIM is all about. And if you do want to know more, then please visit the Building Smart website. And you'll be glad to know that they have been recently given a facelift, so they don't look like they're from the 1990s anymore. And they're much easier to navigate, and there is actually some really useful stuff on there now. There's also a dedicated technical website for more information about the standards. So what about the future? Well, machine learning's going to solve all our problems, isn't it? Well, no, because because you still need good quality data, and most AI initiatives actually fail because there is a lack of it. And I've been really fortunate to attend some linked data events which use the IFC schema for the basis of this thing called IFC OWL, which is IFC Web Ontology Language. And this allows us to make use of linked data technologies and the semantic web, which is some of the things which Paul was talking about earlier. And this is where data is actually given meaning by using graph models to make better connections of complex data, which improves connectivity. And it's kind of what we have now, but on steroids. And then all this can then eventually tie in with AI and machine learning. You still need that quality data set there to do this. And then at the CDBB Digital Twin event a couple of weeks ago, Mark Enzer talked about the need for consistency of data for digital twins. And I've also been to many smart city events where the same sort of message has been repeated. So it's all about having good quality, consistent information to do these things. So this is my Nick Fury moment, and where everybody here comes in. So in the UK and Ireland chapter, it's been a little bit quiet over the past few years, but I do think more people are now starting to understand the need for Open BIM. So it's time to breathe some new life into the chapter and get more people involved to contribute more to much sort of international level. You know, we have so much great knowledge and experience here, and it would be a shame to waste it. And at home, there's some really important challenges which we need to address, and the main one is education, like Phil was talking about earlier. There is a real sort of need to really go back to basics with this type of stuff, including, you know, really the basics of digital literacy, and then educating industry on what Open BIM is, why it's needed, and how it can actually be applied to real life projects. And I just wanted to ask a question actually. How many people here have either seen or read ISO 16739? And I really want you to be truthful. Okay. So how many people have ever seen this website, have looked at it? Okay, so that's a few more people. Well, this is actually ISO 16739. Now, where is that communicated? It's little things like that, real basic contextual issues that aren't well communicated. So there's barriers to this before you even get into the really geeky, techie stuff. And that's what we need to change. And other areas of focus, in particular, is the in-use phase. Again, like Phil mentioned earlier, educating clients and their advisors. We're seeing many more requirements now which are actually asking for specific proprietary software formats, which is forcing designers and specialists to use tools which may not be best for the job. And sort of other things we can look at as well is what does good look like? You know, I see many IFC models which are actually just data dumps, and which, you know, is not what IFC is about, and that gives it a bad name, which is one of the reasons I created the Revit and IFC blog. So if you do use Revit and you have to export IFC files, you know, please go and look at that blog because there's a lot of information there to help you. And then working with vendors as well to really, you know, try and sort out the interoperability issues because, you know, as you well know, IFC is still not, you know, the import and export of IFC is not perfect, and there's a lot more that could be done in terms of, you know, sort of, in terms to help users. And then there's professional certification, again, that Phil mentioned earlier, and what we do in terms of that. So if you do want to be involved, then please send your details to this email. I've had some questions about, you know, how much time commitment will be involved, but the answer to that is I actually don't know, because we're really right at the start of this, and we're just kind of gauging interest from industry at the moment as kind of numbers and the amount of involvement that, you know, people want to give. So, you know, we'll let you know once we have a clearer picture. So there we go. Any questions?
Thank you, Emma.
I think my slide was last three.
Yeah. Anyone got any questions before we move on?
Are you being involved in the potential development of ISO 19650 Part 4 as well?
Yes, I'm down for it. Busy. I've actually been told by Ian today that I've got to start saying no to things. Yeah, he's training me. It's not going very well at the moment. Yes, George?
Yeah, Emma, excellent presentation. One of the things that interests me with that is that the whole thing about model view definitions is something that when I speak to people, very few people understand.
Yeah.
And therefore, they just blankly ask for IFC, and they've not given any, they don't really understand what they're asking for.
They don't know why they're asking for it. It's just one of those things, native IFC. Don't know what IFC is, just got a load of data dumped into it. Yeah, see it all the time. And, you know, the whole point of MVDs is it's that filter. only gives the information that's in the requirements for that particular use.
I've lost count of the number of people that have said, we're not interested in Kobe, we'll use IFC instead. and really, anybody that says that, they just don't understand.
No, and that's what I was talking about, the basics, the real basics really need communicating, because there's also a lot of myths and Chinese whispers around all this stuff as well, and it tends to be the people who shout the loudest that get heard, but sometimes actually what they say isn't right. So we need to really kind of crack down on that and actually just really kind of get the key messages out there.
I think one of the things is that I looked a little while ago, and I was influenced by your colleague that you wrote the book with, the American guy.
Bill.
No.
Sean.
Sean. Yeah, sorry. He pointed me at this 2 or 3 years ago at the different model view definitions, and there are so many that work has been done on, but is then not got carried any further. So, for example, there's a model view definition for FM, and everybody thinks that's Kobe, but it's not. That's for handover.
Well, no, because actually part of the SLM 92 Part 4, the actual design part is basic handover view, and then as you go to construction, it's Kobe.
Yeah.
No one really knows that though.
Yes, exactly.
So there's so much.
And there's a life cycle one as well.
There's a lot that was developed by the AIA,
Yeah.
which is actually separate to Building Smart. That's where Kobe was developed.
Yeah.
But Kobe is actually now in draft version for Building Smart. So there is again the basics and the context there is missing.
So the work that was done on those original, like the life cycle one, and there's one for mechanical and there's one for electrical.
Sparky.
Yeah, which is great, isn't it? Is that lost? Is anybody looking at that?
As far as I know, because SPY was also part of that. I don't think they are being developed at the moment.
It'd be a shame to lose that learning, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But I saw on the website the other day that there are more on the Building Smart website that are in development. So there's a costing one, and I think there's an energy analysis one which is also being developed. But it's endless really, because it's based on every single use.
Yeah.
Ask a question. Do you think the IFC open bin debate hinges around vendors or around the culture of the industry?
I think it's a bit of both. It's culture in the fact that we don't think about data in the way that we should. We see that all the time with models. People just look at the visual side of it. As humans, we're always very attracted visually to things, and data's boring. It's invisible. It's something that geeks do over there. But actually, we all need to be really aware of it, the basics of it, which is why I talked about the whole digital literacy aspect. But then, vendors have got a real big part to play, because actually, we've got this standard, but they're not implementing it very well, and that's the truth of the matter, and that's when people lose faith in it.
Hi, so Mohammed Marta. I think a lot of what, like the BIM, I'm new to the BIM Alliance and everything, and I think a lot of what a lot of these organizations are doing, generally speaking, is really good. So be it publishing, like for example, the guidance notes, that's great. The outreach that's happening is great. But at the end of the day, the fundamental problem is that a lot of people don't read. So at that point, it becomes, like literally in the 10-minute presentation that you just gave, you distilled the relationship between IFC, MVDs, BCF, and so on in a 10-minute presentation. And I think there should be more of these types of videos that are going out, and less reliance on written stuff. So even with the guidance notes, they're great, but the guidance notes are still 50 pages of a 50-page document that people have to read. If they were fine with reading that, they would have read the standard to begin with, and then we wouldn't have some of these problems.
I agree, and especially with this type of stuff, it tends to be the techie people who have to deal with it, and we don't like reading, to be honest. I don't really. I'd rather, it really needs to be part, I think, of the technology that guides you through it, and we need to look at different ways of communicating communicating this type of stuff, because you know we are now being bombarded with guidance, and you know we're not going to read it. It's like with all the BIM documentation. You know, if you produce 100-page bets, people aren't going to read it. So you know, I mean, like you know, with Bond Brand Digital, we're looking at that at the moment. You know, how we can communicate things in different ways for people. So no, I do agree.
I think just to expand on that, does the UK BIM Alliance have still involvement from some good Marcoms companies, obviously thinking Subutra and CIB and others, you know, companies that can take these really good, useful, I'm not going to use the word dumbed down, but simplistic way in which you've put the technical stuff across for people to understand, because it's the biggest thing holding manufacturers back. There are probably 4 or 5 people that I could name that do the tour, and within 5 minutes they've named 13 ISOs and 10 standards, and everyone's switched off, and nobody's listening. Nobody's understanding it, and so this sort of thing is exactly what we need at all levels. But I'm wondering if we've got in the UK BIM Alliance that mechanism of getting the message, that sort of simple, here's the first steps you need to make, the kind of...
I'll probably jump in there, so that would fall in engagement as a sage point. So we do have a YouTube channel where exactly, so Emma's presentation will sit on there, but you're right, it's communicating in a better medium. We do have links obviously with CDBB, BSI and media partners, so that is something we probably need to look at. I just want to pick up on the point there that, and Anne would pick up on it, appreciate the guidance comment about people don't want to pick up and read it, and I think you said people don't read the standard, then they're not going to read. The guidance isn't supposed to be, you know, so you can avoid reading, you know, it's to go, you read the standard and then you go to the guidance. It was just to make that point, but to have some simple sort of videos or something explaining it rather than another document. Completely agree, and that would probably play really nicely into when I see at the back when he talks about the power of video and construction. So that's probably lined that up really nicely. A few more questions before we Harry.
I am a great presentation earlier. With the ISO standard which is being developed at the moment in time, has infrastructure been taken into account in that ISO standard which is coming out? Because obviously with large infrastructure schemes such as Heathrow expansion, HS2 and Crossrail 2 hope in the future, so with this ISO standard coming out, has it been tested and developed the infrastructure?
So there's many different sort of versions of IFC. So the one we work to now is 2x3, but there's also IFC 4 and IFC 4.2, which is in draft form on the website, actually includes civil engineering entities like IFC Alignment, IFC Bridge, and IFC 5, which is currently in development, is also looking at IFC Rail. And at the moment, that's just come out for a vote. So anybody actually involved in the rail sector, if you want to be involved in that, you know, come and speak to me, and I can get you involved in looking at that. So there's a lot being done at the moment with building smart in terms of infrastructure.
It's very much the call to arms, isn't it, to get that, get the infrastructure community and those people involved like yourself. Absolutely. Well, I think we're good to move on. Thank you, Emma. Really good. I'm having to quickly check back at the agenda that we've swapped around. So now, if I can invite, I can see Anne at the back, our chair, to give an update from view from the bridge. Wonderful, thank you, Anne. And I shall go to your slides while you're coming up here.
Yeah, sure.
What am I doing?
I know you don't like slides.
No, so they've made me do a few slides. So where I'll start first of all is, if you haven't already heard, I'll tell you now, is the UK BIM framework has landed. So levels is gone. It's going. But, we just feel that it's unhelpful now to be talking about BIM level 2, level 3. So what we want to do now is to anchor everyone. So the ISO 19650, obviously we've already touched on. Parts 1, Part 2 were published earlier this year. We're developing the guidance for that. That is as brief as we can make it, but we're also making it so that it's an interactive PDF. What we'd like to do is to actually get it so that it is interactive as a tool. So actually, less and less will you have to read loads of stuff. I think the only thing I would say with that is that actually people engage in different ways. Some people do actually like to read. So what we want to do is to have a flexible sort of ecosystem of supporting guidance tools to enable people to pick it up in the way that is appropriate to them. But kind of as a little bit of a revisal of where we've been and where we're at, although we're moving forward, we don't forget what's happened in the past and all of those people who've worked so hard in the past to get us where we are at the moment. So it's very much the phrase which is used is that, you know, people, we are standing on the shoulders of giants before us. Is that, you know, we've been working on this, people have been working on this for years and years, and we must be able to appreciate that. So we are absolutely building on the 1192 series and all of the things associated with that. But what we've had the opportunity of, and the UK government actually started this process back in 2014, is we've lifted those to international standards. That has to be by consensus through the international community, so it's not a like for like. But what we have been able to do on that journey is to embrace all of the lessons learned within the UK, but then also internationally, about how to manage information whole life for the built environment, which is around asset management. It is about actually what society and individuals needs. It is anticipating where we will want to go with the National Digital Twin Programme, which I'll talk to you a little bit about in a minute. But essentially where we've got to is that the concepts and principles of 1192 have been lifted into Part 1 of 19650. It does anticipate where we want to go with the National Digital Twin Programme. It absolutely is about whole life. It's about all stakeholders, from society through to asset owners and through to the planning and strategy. And I've deliberately not referred to design and construction because I think we all know that that is as read, but this is much more anticipating that broader ecosystem. So the concepts and principles of all of that has gone into Part 1 19650. It prepares the ground for where we are working and we're moving forward. The main clauses of BS 1192 2007 and of PAS 1192 Part 2 have gone into 19650 Part 2. So please note that it's not a one-on-one relationship. As much as possible, we've been able to bring in the lessons learned. For instance, of the alignment of Part 2 and 3 was poor within the 1192 suite, and maybe it wasn't terribly easy to see how you were supposed to implement the whole of the package. There were some remaining clauses which we weren't able to lift into ISO. Those detailed specifics have gone into the National Annex, which has become, once it's been published at UK, that is now a part of Part 2 as the National Annex. And what we're saying now is that, so we've had this great suite of documents developed over a period of years. So actually the term BIM Level 2 appeared here. So if you thought that was BIM Level 2, and then actually, oh, by the way, we've just added Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, Part 6. What was that BIM Level 2? I think it was a fantastic concept for us to really get the UK industry to get behind this movement of understanding that managing information is important and that we were developing best practice as we went along. But enough's enough. I think we all got very lazy. We all, I think, probably have heard all of the things about somebody is saying, oh, can you do BIM Level 2 for me? And this could be a Tier 3 contractor saying, oh, I want you to do BIM Level 2 for me. And I want you to have passed all the tests to say that you can do BIM Level 2. And those tests actually included how you actually specified an employer's information requirement. It had become rather nonsensical and contradictory. So actually, with ISO 19650 being launched in the new year, we had the chance, and we're grabbing the opportunity to press the reset button. So that all of these different versions of, oh, well, actually, yeah, I like 1192 and BIM level 2, but I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to train it my way with my own language, I think has become hugely unhelpful. So what we want to do is to develop that common understanding. And that's why we're introducing, as a part of this, we are actually introducing the guidance and the guidance framework. So I'll just flick this through. Do notice, therefore, that, for instance, 55,000, which I know you mentioned earlier, that is absolutely being embraced as a part of what we need to be including here. We've also got a few things happening which will become a part of this framework. So we've got part 3 and part 5 in flight at the moment. So part 5 is the security. That's actually closed for comment. I'm hoping that we'll be able to publish that in the first half of next year. Part 3 is open for consultation right now. Please, please go and have a look. I'm really excited by what we've done with part 3, what we've been able to do with that. We've got unified workflows compatible with part 2. I think it's a much, much better document than we had with 1192. However, I want as many people to go in, have a look at it, challenge it if you don't like it, or if you like it, say. But as convener, I cannot make changes, I cannot make comments myself. I need you to put in the comments, but please, and I know a few of you have heard me say this before, please don't say, no, don't like it. Please say, I don't like this particular point, and this is what I propose you do instead. That gives us something very substantive to be able to debate at the working group at ISO level that we can then put in as a change. So that is it's in flight at the moment. It's so important as the UK that we do respond to that and make sure that we get this to be the best document that we possibly can. So actually I'll go back to that. As I say, what's important is with the guidance framework, we're able to anticipate what's coming. So actually when these land and our beloved 1192 documents get withdrawn, there isn't a panic. We can say, this is how it fits, and this is how to respond, this is how to implement it. Again, with the guidance framework, I think we'll be touching a base on that, but if you want to get involved, absolutely, it's open to you to be involved and to help us. And what we're saying here is that ISO 19650 gives us a framework for managing information. So the UK BIM framework has now landed. You'll hear a lot about it at Digital Construction Week. There's going to be quite a lot of publicity, which is joint with British Standards Institution, CDBB, and ourselves over the next month or so. But what it is it's based on the ISO 19650. It's using the framework for managing information within a UK context. And that UK BIM package does actually encompass the 1192 suite, the 8536, etc., associated standards. It includes a guidance framework, and we fully intend to identify what tools are needed to help you and the wider industry to implement this on an ongoing basis. And that's exactly where we want feedback from you and a much wider group of people to say, actually, it would be really helpful if you could look at this, please. Now, it might not be the Alliance that does it. It may be that we facilitate and actually ask others to do that as well, or for somebody else to take a lead. That's absolutely fine, providing we can coordinate that and we can get that consensus and that common understanding. So the important thing I think I'd like to say is that we are actively discouraging, for instance, professional institutions or training bodies to come up with their own version. It's to please use a guidance framework and hang off the guidance framework with whatever you want to develop. So that's, again, a campaign that we'll be really working on. And I think that's absolutely what Phil was talking about earlier as well. So with the UK BIM framework, the future is now. Actually, it is supporting what CDBB is looking at. We do not need to then be racing ahead and rejecting the UK BIM framework. That is the anchor. It is the foundation. So now, instead of people thinking, oh, levels, competitive, let me do level 10, please. It's no, the framework is here, but actually even the framework, we've deliberately said, is you can't say, oh, I want the framework. Framework implies actually you've got to specify what you want within that framework. So it's, again, to help us stop being lazy in our language in the way that we're actually implementing things. So it's certainly not the end of the journey. You know, we are touching thousands, but actually there's millions that we need to touch. So we've got a heck of a lot of work to do going forward. And you know, thank you very much for being here today, but we really need your help and we need to extend much wider. So, as I say, the guidance framework should not be 50 pages of text. I don't believe it is actually 50 pages of text. It is interactive now, but we need to make sure that actually it's useful and usable for a wide audience. So your help and guidance on that absolutely is really important. I think we will be talking about this, but it is, and I think this is probably one of the most exciting collaborative efforts I've been involved with. And ISO was pretty lively and interesting, but this one's really enjoyable in as much as we've got people who absolutely have disagreed vociferously on Twitter, who are actually come to the party, they're on the focus groups, they challenge what's being written, give different perspectives, and I think that really is enhancing actually where we're at and how we can move forward. So please let us know if you know people who are disagreeing or are disenchanted. We want to really get them engaged and involved in this. I think, isn't Sarah going to be presenting on some of this?
Yes,
she is. So I might just stop on this. We've got those two parts. I'll let Sarah talk a little bit more about that. But it is freely available. It will continue to be freely available. We will be launching a joint website on the UK BIM framework between BSI, CDBB and the Alliance, where you'll be able to get the supporting tools and guidance for the UK BIM framework and the link then to the standards themselves. As I say, that will be happening over the next month and a launch at Digital Construction Week. So I think at that point, I think I'll probably, if I have time, have I run out of time?
No, because I think we're going to have a break next.
Okay, so just very briefly to say, as you'll have picked up, we do have close alignment with BSI and with CDBB. Someone asked about part 4. Emma's certainly involved, Julian Schwarzenbach, in supporting Nick Nisbet, who will be the technical author. But for instance, on that, we've got a workshop, I think it's the 4th of November, where we're inviting a whole load of different people to come along and challenge what we require from part 4. It'll be around information exchange. It's not going to be just COBE. That will probably go into the National Annex, and the National Annex will probably propose that IFC, COBE could be instruments for that. But again, this is something that we want to feed in. I'm looking at some of the people who are quite anxious. If you feel that you haven't been invited to that and want to, please let me know and we'll facilitate that to happen. But it really is, from a UK perspective, what we want to do is to support and guide Nick in writing that first draft so that actually as it goes to ISO, we've got the best foundation we can for moving forward on that. So I've just come away from a strategy meeting at British Standards Institution where we're looking at what we need to do to support the 19650 and the UK BIM framework. So what is missing from that, what standards need to evolve to support 19650 going forward. And with CDBB, yesterday there was a workshop to talk about the digital framework, or more specifically the information management framework, which will support the National Digital Twin Programme, as it's now being referred to. So I know that there are some people who hate digital twin as a term, but the feeling is that the politicians and the CEOs understand digital twin and that language, and it's it's good enough. From a technical perspective, we may want to discuss and debate it, but it's good enough to get the wider built environment ecosystem community on board. So we will keep you in touch with that, but the key thing is, and what I'm really pleased about, is they absolutely view the UK BIM framework as being the anchor to support that. So it will continue to be there as that foundation. I think that's probably enough for the moment. If there's any questions.
There's no questions on slide out of the room.
Oh, I'm tempted to say, because we will have a Q&A at the end, so
yeah,
if you save any questions for the end, then we'll get the team up and we can field them then. Okay, thanks, Anne, wonderful. So just a 10-minute comfort break, so if we get back in here for about 10 to, and then we'll start the rest of the session.
That's
That's going to be interesting.